Don't mess with my kid, Karen. The first time I saw my son walk out of school with tears streaming down his face, something inside me broke. He wasn't the kind of kid who cried easily. Shy, yes. Quiet, yes, but never dramatic. He'd always been the gentle one, the kind who apologized when someone else bumped into him, the kind who hugged his teacher every morning, who drew her little pictures on sticky notes and left them on her desk. So when he came home that day, his face pale, his little hands shaking, I knew something was wrong. It all started when we missed Meet the Teacher night, the first one we'd ever missed. Life had been chaotic. My husband was out of town on business, I had a work deadline I couldn't move, and by the time I checked the calendar, the event had already come and gone. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. His school had always been fantastic, one of the best in the district, filled with warm, caring teachers. What could possibly go wrong? Apparently, everything. That first day, he didn't say much, just that his new teacher, Ms. K, seemed different. I brushed it off as nerves, the usual new school year jitters. But by day 2, he came home quiet, too quiet. His backpack was half-zipped, his lunch untouched. When I asked how his day was, he just mumbled, "Fine," and ran to his room. Day 3, he refused to get out of the car. We were sitting in the carpool line, engines humming, the morning sun glaring off windshields. He stared out the window, his lip trembling. "Mom," he whispered, "please don't make me go." At first, I thought he was being dramatic. Maybe a test he didn't study for. Maybe a playground squabble. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "it's just school." Then he started crying. Real tears, the kind that come from somewhere deep. She screams Mom, she yells at everyone. She makes me stand up when I don't even do anything wrong. Everyone laughs at me. My stomach dropped. I pulled over and turned to face him. "What do you mean?" she yells. He shook his head, too scared to explain. He just kept whispering, "I don't want to go." That was the first day he threw up, right there in the car line. The teacher on duty came rushing over, trying to calm him down, but I could see the panic in her eyes. Parents behind us honked, impatient, unaware that a 7-year-old was having a breakdown in the front seat. That night, I called one of my friends. Her son was in the classroom next door. I asked if she'd heard anything strange about Ms. K. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then she sighed. "Oh, honey," she said softly. "We can hear her screaming through the walls." My blood ran cold. Apparently, this woman, this supposed teacher, had a reputation for being tough, for whipping kids into shape, as some parents put it. The kind of teacher who believed fear was discipline, who believed humiliation built character. And my son, my sweet, quiet boy, had been stuck in her class for 3 days. 3 days too long. The next morning, I marched straight into the principal's office. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "My son will not be in her class another day," I said. "You will move him immediately." The principal tried to calm me down, offering the same tired excuses. Her methods are firm but effective. Some children just need structure. I stared her down. My child doesn't need to be traumatized to learn his ABCs. By the end of the day, he was reassigned to a different teacher, Mrs. Allen, an angel in human form. She welcomed him with open arms, spoke softly, and even let him bring a stuffed animal on the first day to help him adjust. But the damage was done. Even after the switch, he would wake up crying, begging not to go. He'd flinch when a teacher raised her voice, even if it wasn't at him. He'd whisper, "Is she here?" every time we walked down the hall at school. Once, while volunteering in the classroom, he tugged my sleeve and pointed discreetly. "That's her," he whispered, his eyes wide with fear. And there she was, Ms. K, standing tall, clipboard in hand, barking orders at another group of kids. Her expression sharp, her eyes cold. That was the moment something inside me shifted. You see, I'm not a violent person. Never have been. But when it comes to my child, the line between calm and chaos is thin. Very thin. I knew I couldn't confront her. Not the way I wanted to. That would risk everything, including my son's peace. So instead, I decided on something quieter. Something she'd never see coming. Revenge. The kind that smiles to your face. And that's how my long, slow game began. 3 years of subtle, delicious payback and hidden in plain sight. But I'll get to that soon. For now, let me tell you the one rule I live by. A rule every parent should remember. Don't mess with my kid. Because I will smile, nod, and volunteer with you every week. But the moment you hurt him, I'll make sure you never forget it. I started volunteering at the school a few months after the whole ordeal. Mostly because I wanted to keep a closer eye on my son. And, if I'm being honest, on her. I told the PTA I just wanted to get more involved. But deep down, I knew I had another reason. A quieter, pettier reason. Ms. K was still there, strutting around the halls like she ran the place. I could always hear her before I saw her. That sharp, clipped voice slicing through the noise of morning drop-offs, her heels clicking like a metronome of misery. She smiled when parents were near, but I'd seen the truth behind that smile. So had my son. Volunteering gave me a perfect view of her little kingdom. I started small, helping in the front office, organizing supplies, sorting the teachers' to-do lists. I wasn't just a helper, I was a set of eyes and ears. I learned which teachers were loved and which ones were feared. And, unsurprisingly, Ms. K fell firmly in the second category. Even the other teachers avoided her. One once whispered to me, "She's great with discipline, but God help you if she doesn't like you." I smiled politely, but inside my stomach turned. For a while, I kept my head down. I didn't want to draw attention to myself, but I made sure that when I was around, Ms. K's life got just a little bit harder. Nothing obvious, just 1,000 tiny inconveniences. If she needed classroom supplies somehow, the request would get lost in the shuffle. If she wanted a volunteer to handle something for her class, I'd conveniently run out of time before getting to it. Her name always ended up last on the list. "Oh, sorry, Ms. K," I'd say sweetly. "I just had so much to do today. I'll try to get to your stuff next time." And she'd force that fake little smile of hers, teeth clenched, eyes twitching. I lived for that twitch. See, some people think revenge has to be explosive. A big confrontation, a screaming match, a grand finale. But no, the best kind of revenge is slow, subtle, and quiet. The kind where your target doesn't even realize they're being bled dry, one inconvenience at a time. For the first year, it was simple things: delays, missing forms, accidentally mixing up her class's field trip requests. But the second year, that's when it got interesting. Every teacher relied on parent volunteers for certain events: book fairs, classroom parties, fundraisers. Ms. K liked to think she was in charge of everything, but the truth was, nothing happened in that school without the parents' help. And I was the unofficial coordinator, so I made sure every event she was responsible for went just a little bit sideways. Nothing that would get her fired, of course, just enough to chip away at that perfect image she tried to maintain. One fall festival, her booth was missing half its decorations. Somehow they'd been misplaced in the supply room. During a class project, the copies she needed weren't approved by admin yet. Once, I even accidentally swapped her presentation files on the computer so that when she tried to show her slides to the principal, up popped a completely blank screen. The look on her face that day was priceless, and every time, I was right there to help, pretending to look concerned. "Oh no, that's so strange, Ms. K. How could that have happened?" She'd glare at me, sensing something she couldn't quite prove, but she never said a word. It became our unspoken war. Every time she passed me in the hallway, there was this tension, like she knew I was behind it, but she couldn't do a thing about it. Because to everyone else, I was just another helpful mom with a bright smile and perfect attendance. And while she struggled, my son thrived. He'd started to heal, little by little. His new teacher, Mrs. Allen, worked wonders. He started drawing again, reading again. The fear in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by laughter. But even now, years later, he'd still point her out in the hallway, whispering, "That's her, Mom." And every time I'd nod, keeping my smile steady, because I could never forget, not for 1 second. I knew that if I ever lost control, if I ever let the anger spill out, it would ruin everything. I'd wind up in handcuffs or in front of the principal again, labeled one of those parents. So I stayed calm. I let patience do the work. And over time, I noticed something else. Ms. K wasn't as untouchable as she thought. The other teachers started whispering about her, complaining that her methods were too harsh. Parents started requesting not to have their kids in her class. One day, while helping sort teacher requests, I noticed something on the forms. Her name was missing. No one had requested her. Not a single parent. I smiled so wide that day I had to turn away so no one would see. The best part? She'd done it to herself. My quiet little campaign hadn't destroyed her. It had simply exposed who she really was. Still, I wasn't done. Not yet. Because the universe might take its time, but I've learned that karma always circles back, and I was going to make sure that when it did, I'd be there to watch it happen. By the third year, my quiet little revenge had turned into an art form. I never said a cruel word, never raised my voice, never did anything that could be traced back to me. But Ms. K's reputation? It was starting to crumble like stale bread. Everywhere I went, whispers followed. Parents murmuring about her teaching style, teachers exchanging side glances when she walked past, students flinching when her sharp voice echoed down the hallway. It wasn't just me anymore. People were noticing. The cracks in her polished exterior were finally showing. And I just kept volunteering. Always polite, always dependable, the perfect school mom. I'll never forget one morning in the teacher's lounge. I was restocking the supply cabinet when two teachers walked in, chatting in hushed tones. "I can't take it anymore," one of them whispered. "She made a kid cry again during math drills. Poor thing couldn't even look up. She says it's tough love," the other muttered, rolling her eyes. "I say it's a lawsuit waiting to happen." They laughed nervously. Then one of them noticed me standing there. "Oh, sorry, didn't mean to gossip," she said. I smiled. "Don't worry," I said lightly. I didn't hear a thing, but I heard everything. That afternoon, I saw Ms. K in the hallway, clipboard in hand, barking at a student for walking too slowly. Her voice was like nails on a chalkboard. I passed by her with my volunteer badge and a smile so sugary it could rot teeth. "Morning, Ms. K," I chirped. Her eyes narrowed. "Good morning," she said flatly. There was something brittle in her tone, like she knew she'd lost her hold on me, like she sensed that I wasn't scared of her anymore. And I wasn't. My son had moved on. He was in 5th grade now, confident, thriving. But every once in a while, when he saw her across the cafeteria, he'd tense up, that shadow crossing his face. That's all it took to keep my quiet fire burning. She hadn't just been mean. She'd taken a piece of his innocence, made him afraid of school, the one place that was supposed to feel safe. That kind of damage doesn't just disappear. One day, while helping with the school's literacy fair, I saw her name on the volunteer task board. She'd signed up for a big project, organizing student readers for the event. Of course, she needed help. And of course, I was the one coordinating the volunteers. It was almost too easy. "Oops," I said to myself as I accidentally sent her the wrong time slot. "Oh no," I muttered as I misplaced her resource materials. When the big day came, she stood there, clipboard empty, no students in sight, looking utterly confused. The principal walked by, frowning. "Ms. K, where are your readers?" Her cheeks flushed red. "They were supposed to meet me here at 10. It's 11, he said curtly. "They've already gone with another group." The humiliation on her face was priceless. And me? I was standing just a few feet away, handing out bookmarks, pretending not to notice a thing. After that day, something shifted in her. She wasn't as loud in the halls. She didn't bark orders at parents anymore. Maybe it was because she realized people were watching now. Or maybe, just maybe, she was starting to realize that the world didn't revolve around her power trip. But karma wasn't done yet. A few weeks later, my friend, who worked in the office, called me, her voice full of barely restrained excitement. "You didn't hear this from me," she whispered, but Ms. K got written up. I nearly dropped the phone. What? For what? For yelling at a parent during a conference? Apparently, she lost her temper. The mom complained to the district district. They're reviewing her file. I sat down, trying not to laugh. The universe really did have a sense of humor. It wasn't me this time. It was her own behavior catching up to her. All I'd done was make sure the spotlight was shining when she decided to self-destruct. The next time I saw her, she looked smaller, tired. That smug energy she used to carry around was gone. She didn't even make eye contact. She just kept walking, her heels echoing down the corridor like the last beats of a dying song. And I'll admit it, I felt satisfaction. Not because I'd ruined her life, but because she'd finally been forced to face herself. Still, I wasn't cruel. I didn't gloat. I didn't say a word. I just kept volunteering, helping, smiling. Because that's the thing about people like her. They expect loud retaliation. They feed off confrontation. What they can't handle is quiet, unshakable dignity, so I let her live with it. Every time she looked at me, I made sure she saw it in my eyes. That calm, unspoken message. You messed with the wrong mom. But fate wasn't quite finished with her yet, because just when I thought my long, quiet war was over, just when I was ready to move on, a new rumor started spreading through the school. Something that would finally and completely change everything for Ms. K. And I swear I had nothing to do with it. At least, not directly. The rumor started like a whisper, almost too quiet to catch. I didn't even need to start it. The universe, it seemed, had its own timing. Parents began murmuring in the hallways. Teachers exchanged worried glances. And suddenly Ms. K, who once commanded the room with her sharp tongue and clipped heels, looked unsure, like she was walking on ice. It began with a complaint from a parent who had observed her scolding a child in front of the entire class. Nothing shocking by itself. Children misbehave, teachers correct them. But this time, the parent had recorded it. The video circulated, quietly among the administration and the PTA, and the whispers began. "She's harsh," one parent said under her breath. "I thought that was normal," another muttered. And just like that, Ms. K's carefully crafted persona of control and authority began to crumble. She walked into classrooms and hallways that once obeyed her without question, and now felt eyes on her, judging, calculating, waiting for her to slip. I watched from my volunteer perch, arms crossed loosely over my chest, a polite smile in place. She didn't notice me, or maybe she did, but I was harmless. I was just the mom. But the way she flinched at whispers, the way she glanced around nervously before speaking, it gave me satisfaction I couldn't quite describe. It wasn't enough that she was losing her aura of invincibility. She needed to feel it, and the universe obliged. A week later, the principal called a meeting with all the teachers. I wasn't invited, of course, but I knew what it was about. Ms. K had received multiple complaints from both parents and colleagues. Her disciplinary style had crossed lines, at least lines the district wasn't willing to ignore anymore. When she came out of that meeting, she didn't look the same. The fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by something that resembled defeat. She walked through the hallways, her usual clipped heels sounding less confident, the sharp click now hollow, echoing off walls that had once feared her. And then, as if on cue, a parent volunteer approached her with a small, hesitant question about an upcoming class project. Ms. K snapped. Just a little, a flicker of that old self yelling, overreacting. But it was enough. Enough that the conversation ended with the parent storming off, muttering about filing a formal complaint. I saw it happen, and I almost laughed aloud. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because justice sometimes comes quietly, slowly, subtly. The way my own hand had orchestrated small inconveniences over 3 years was like a prelude, but now it was life itself dealing the final chords. Her reputation began to take hits everywhere. Parents requested transfers for their children. Fellow teachers avoided collaboration with her. The administration had meetings behind closed doors, and I heard snippets. Her methods are ineffective. Perhaps she isn't suited for this grade level. This isn't working. And Ms. K, she couldn't reclaim her power. Every step she took was under scrutiny. Every word she spoke was weighed. She had become a shadow of her former self, haunted by her own actions. Meanwhile, my son thrived. He laughed again on the playground, raised his hand in class without fear, and even started tutoring other students who were shy like he once was. Watching him regain his confidence was a quiet joy, almost more satisfying than seeing Ms. K stumble. Almost. I kept volunteering naturally, but I no longer needed to actively interfere. Life itself was enforcing consequences. She was a cautionary tale in real time. The teacher who thought she could terrorize children with no repercussions, now humbled in ways even I couldn't have engineered. And yet, life has a way of teaching humility when the lesson is finally needed. Ms. K, once so sure of her place in the world, now avoided eye contact with me. When she passed by in the hallways, she whispered polite greetings that sounded forced, almost desperate. She was aware, I think, that I had always known exactly who she was, the person my child feared, the teacher whose anger could make a 7-year-old vomit. And in that awareness, I realized something important. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about justice in the traditional sense. It was about balance. My son's peace had been restored, and the natural consequences of her behavior had finally caught up with her. I kept my smile polite, my posture calm, as I watched her navigate the halls with that strange mixture of caution and fear. I had done nothing directly, but I had ensured that the universe's lesson would land right where it needed to, and it had. Even now, my son will occasionally point out a teacher who is strict or loud, whispering to me, "Remember her?" And I smile quietly, nodding, because sometimes the past teaches lessons in ways children remember forever. Some things, like the fear she inflicted, the lessons she ignored, leave scars. But some things, like a child's regained confidence, the restoration of peace, leave smiles. And that balance, subtle and perfect, is worth more than any confrontation, more than any shout, more than any overt revenge, because sometimes the sweetest justice is quiet, subtle, almost invisible, except to those who need to remember it. By the time the next school year rolled around, Ms. K was a different person entirely. Not in a she's learned her lesson way. No, it was deeper than that. There was a tension in her movements, a hesitation in her voice, and a subtle shrink in her stature. The confidence she had once worn like armor was gone, replaced with a nervous energy that made her glance over her shoulder as if someone were always watching. I saw it every day as I volunteered. She tried to maintain her authority, tried to demand respect from parents and students alike, but it simply wasn't there anymore. Every misstep she made was noticed, whispered about, and slowly a sort of quiet isolation began to settle around her. Colleagues avoided her. Parents gave her curt nods and turned away. The school community, once under her control, had learned its lesson. No one feared her anymore. One afternoon, while helping with the spring book fair, I noticed her flustered, holding a stack of books that didn't belong to her section. She glanced around desperately, searching for a volunteer who could help her organize them, and I stood there, badge in place, smiling politely. "Oh, Ms. K, can I give you a hand?" I asked, my tone innocuous, light. She hesitated. For a split second, I thought she might refuse. But then, with a stiff nod, she handed me the pile. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her glasses. "Thank you," she muttered, voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I stacked the books meticulously, pretending to focus on the task while glancing at her out of the corner of my eye. I watched her struggle to regain composure in front of parents who were walking past, some of whom offered supportive smiles. I could almost hear the silent commentary, "This is the same teacher who made our kids cry." Later, during the parent-teacher conferences, I overheard snippets that made my stomach tighten, not with anger, but with the long-awaited satisfaction of witnessing consequences take shape. "She's very strict, maybe too strict for some kids," a parent murmured. "She just doesn't understand sensitivity at this age," another whispered. And every time, Ms. K smiled and nodded, but there was a flicker of fear behind her eyes, the same fear my son had felt, the same weight of awareness that comes only when you finally see the ripple effects of your own cruelty. It wasn't just her reputation that had been damaged. I could see it in the way she interacted with my son. No more shouting, no more sharp words. When he answered a question hesitantly, she paused, forcing herself to breathe, forcing herself to be patient. The lesson had landed, though she might not have realized it. The children mattered more than her ego, and the world was watching. Even the PTA noticed. They began to limit her responsibilities. Fundraisers, event coordination, special projects. Slowly, carefully, she was edged out of the positions where she could exert influence over children or parents. Every misstep she had ever taken came back to her in small, undeniable ways. And the beauty of it all? She never knew exactly why it was happening. Life was simply aligning with justice, a subtle, unspoken balance that didn't require my direct intervention anymore. Meanwhile, my son thrived. His confidence had returned fully. He laughed more freely, raised his hand in class without hesitation, and no longer flinched when a teacher's voice rose. He began helping younger students, quietly patient, kind, right, the exact opposite of the fear he had once carried. One day, as we walked home from school, he pointed toward Ms. K, who was trying to organize a new class lineup. His voice was barely above a whisper, but clear enough for me to hear, "Mom, that's her. Remember how scary she used to be?" I smiled. "I remember." He nodded solemnly, as if that small recognition was all the closure he needed. And in that moment, I realized that revenge, justice, and karma don't always need to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes they unfold quietly, perfectly. A teacher humbled by her own actions, a parent ensuring the child's well-being, and life itself correcting the balance. As I watched Ms. K hurry down the hallway, books in arms, I felt no hatred, only relief. She had learned, painfully slowly, that fear is never a sustainable form of control. And my son? He had been protected, his confidence restored, his innocence preserved. Sometimes, I thought, justice is simply letting life take its course, and occasionally, giving it a gentle nudge in the right direction. But even as the year progressed and Ms. K's presence faded into the background, I couldn't forget the first 3 days. The fear in my son's eyes, the trembling in his small body, the way he had looked at me pleading for help, that memory stayed with me. A reminder that parenting sometimes requires more than patience. Sometimes it requires action, and yes, even quiet, subtle revenge. And I'd done it. Every little push, every gentle delay, every overlooked request, it had all been worth it. Not for me, not for satisfaction, but for him. Because there is one rule I will never forget. Don't mess with my kid. The next school year arrived, and with it, a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. My son walked into the classroom without hesitation, backpack secure, lunchbox in hand, and a smile stretched across his face. I could see the confidence in his shoulders, the quiet assurance that the world was, for now, safe again. No more fear of yelling, no more stomach-churning anxiety. Miss K still lingered in the background, but she was different. Her clipped, confident stride had softened into careful steps. She no longer barked orders at volunteers or students. When she spoke, her voice had a hesitant, controlled tone, as if each word had been measured 100 times before it left her lips. Her glare, once sharp enough to cut glass, now only flickered briefly before fading. I watched her from across the room during a volunteering shift. She was trying to lead a small group in reading exercises, but her hands shook slightly as she flipped through the papers. The students were attentive but cautious, responding with polite answers instead of enthusiasm. The lesson she once commanded with fear now existed in a fragile, fragile silence, a subtle echo of the teacher she used to be. And I smiled. Not because I took pleasure in her struggle, but because the balance had been restored. Life, it seemed, had delivered a quiet justice. She had been humbled by her own actions, her methods exposed, and her presence reined in naturally. No one had to intervene directly. Her own choices had shaped the consequences. Meanwhile, my son thrived. He laughed freely at recess, raised his hand in class with excitement, and shared stories about his day without the tremor of fear. Watching him regain his innocence and confidence was the kind of reward that no confrontation could ever match. The quiet victories of recovery, of healing, were far more satisfying than any overt act of revenge. One afternoon, as I walked him to the car, he tugged gently at my sleeve and whispered, "Mom, remember her?" I glanced toward Ms. K, who was assisting a small group of students at the playground edge, her voice soft and careful. She didn't notice us. "I remember," I replied quietly, crouching to meet his gaze. "And I'm proud of you." He smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile, and skipped toward the car. For the first time in years, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. My son had reclaimed his world, and I had done what any parent would, protected him, guided him, and ensured that life itself taught the lesson she never could have learned otherwise. Weeks passed, and I continued volunteering, but the tension that once hung like a storm cloud over every interaction with Ms. K had dissipated. She kept her head down, focusing on lessons, paperwork, and small tasks. Her authority diminished, her ego tempered. Parents no longer approached me with complaints. Colleagues no longer exchanged secret glances. The storm had passed, leaving only the quiet order that should have existed all along. I often thought back to those first days, the tears, the fear, the small, trembling hands that had clutched mine with such desperation. It was that memory that had fueled my resolve, my patience, and even my subtle acts of interference. And though the methods were quiet, the impact was profound. My son had learned that the world could be safe, that he could navigate it without fear, and that there were people in his corner who would protect him when he needed it most. One evening, after a long day at the school library, I sat at the window watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and pink. My son had already gone to bed, laughing over some joke I couldn't hear. And in that moment, I realized the truth. The greatest victories are often invisible. They are not loud, they are not dramatic, and they rarely require recognition. They are quiet, enduring, and deeply satisfying because they shape the lives of those we love. Ms. K, for her part, faded slowly from my son's world. She remained at the school, but her influence was minimal, her authority tempered. No dramatic confrontation, no explosive outburst, just a natural consequence of her own actions. And my son, he flourished, unafraid, resilient, and happy. As I closed the curtains that evening, I whispered softly to myself, a private affirmation of all that had passed. Don't mess with my kid. You will never see me coming, but life always will. And with that, the school year, the long struggle, and the quiet battle finally felt complete. The balance had been restored. Peace had returned to my child's world, and I, as a parent, had witnessed the profound truth that protection, patience, and subtle perseverance often speak louder than any shout or act of anger ever could. The memory of fear may linger, and the echoes of the past never truly fade. But the knowledge that I had safeguarded my child, that I had ensured his laughter returned, that I had taught him resilience by example, was enough. Because in the end, some victories are not measured in revenge, but in the restoration of innocence, confidence, and peace. And that, more than anything else, was worth every careful step, every subtle maneuver, every quiet act of justice.